Hello, it'll have been a couple of days since you've seen me last. I'm Kerry at Novel Experience. However, I've literally just stopped one video and started recording another. So, you have that pleasure. I'm here to do my November wrap-up today. Although, sorry, I just had to get the right page. November 2015 wrap-up, I read 12 books. I hope you don't mind me using my notebook, but 12 books and only one of them was a physical, the rest were all ebooks, and I just don't have that good a memory, I am sorry. So I hope you don't mind the terrible lighting and me using my little notebook here to remember all the books I read in November. I think 12 books in November is pretty impressive. So let's get started. First of all, I read Truthwitch by Susan Dennard. I got this off of NetGalley. It is only an excerpt. It's not an excerpt. It's not the full book, but what I did read, I really enjoyed. I gave it 4 stars. It follows two magic bearing people. I don't know if you'd call them witches in this book, but two teenagers who can use magic, but each person has a different type of magic. So one of them is a thread witch, and one of them who can see people's like threads, and one of them is a truth witch who can always tell when someone's lying or not. And I really enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars. I would have liked to have seen a little bit more description in terms of an explanation in terms of what exactly threads were, what exactly, you know, thread witches could do. So I think it was really good. The action was great, the characters were great, the plot itself was exciting. I would have just liked to have seen a little bit more detail and a little bit more explanation here and there. So yeah, 4 stars. Then I read Tales from the Graveyard, the complete collection by Susan Schultz, also off of NetGalley. I hated this book. I gave it 1 star, but I would have liked to have given it 0 if I could. Basically, the writing style was every single sentence was a short, simple sentence. It was jolty, it didn't flow, the stories made no sense, the characters were dull, there was no character development. I really didn't enjoy it at all, so I gave it 1 star. Slur by Heather Burnside follows a girl who has been accused of murder. Her and her best friend have been accused of murder, but you know, the whole point was to find out whether she did it or not and that sort of thing. And it's basically a thriller that revolves around the thought of what happens if you've been accused of something you haven't done. So that was really interesting. I quite enjoyed that. I gave that 4 stars. I got this free from the author in exchange for an honest review. So thank you very much, Heather Burnside. I really enjoyed it. The policeman in it was horrible. Did not enjoy the policeman in it. I don't remember why I didn't give it 5. I think it was just a gut feeling more than anything else, but I enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars. I then read a short, very short, like 68-page horror story, Rolling in the Deep by Mira Grant, which is a horror story revolving around mermaids. I really enjoyed it. I'm not going to give you anything into the plot because I think with only 68 pages, anything can give the plot away. So basically, this camera company, like this news company, are going to go and search out mermaids for their news, for their documentary. So it follows them. I really enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars. I would have liked it to have been a little bit longer because it was really good. The Passenger by Lisa Lutz. It was a really difficult one for me. The plot was fine, the characters were fine, the writing was good. I just didn't engage with it, and I don't really know why. There was nothing about it. Wasn't a bad book, so I really don't know why. I just didn't engage with it. So I gave it 3 stars. It wasn't a bad book, I just didn't think it was a good book. There's nothing inherently wrong with it. It just didn't click with me inside. Pretty Girls by Karen Slaughter. I actually have the physical edition right here. Pretty Girls by Karen Slaughter, one of the best books I have read in my life, in my top 5 of this year. I really loved it. It follows 2 sisters, or 2 current sisters. The oldest sister, Julia, has gone missing and has been missing for a very long time, and it follows Lydia and Claire. Lydia being the middle sister, Claire being the youngest sister. It follows them and their journey after their oldest sister has gone missing. And you follow three perspectives. You follow the perspectives of, obviously, Claire and Lydia. So you follow Lydia, and then separately you follow Claire. And then throughout it there are also little teeny tiny snippets of the dad's perspective before the dad has passed away. And his perspective is really unique because he's writing a letter to his oldest missing daughter. So he's writing a letter to Julia, the missing daughter, basically, you know, his perspective on her disappearance and everything that happened. It is one of the best psychological thrillers I have ever read. I loved it. I would recommend it to everyone ever. Please read it. Thank you. Then I read... Did I say that I gave that 5 stars? I did give it 5 stars. Pretty Girls, Karen Slaughter, 5 stars easily. Then I read Witch Hunt by Margit Sandemo. She is a Norwegian fantasy writer who writes this little series, and it is such a sweet little series. It follows the legend of the Ice People. And the Ice People they have powers, but there was one who was called Tengel, and he was inherently evil. He was a horrible man. He killed lots of people, he hurt lots of people. And it basically follows the generations that follow him in their family. And it doesn't follow one particular family or one particular protagonist. Each couple of books follows a different member of the generation to come. So each one will follow a different... The timeline goes on, and you follow different members of the family. This one is the second in the series. They haven't all been translated into English yet. I think the first 8 have been, but this one, obviously the second one has. It's such a strange little book. Yeah, it's written really nicely. It's such a quick little read. They're only at 250 odd pages. They're really, really sweet. They're well written. But Margit Sandemo in Half an Old Lady. There is a scene in it. No, I'm not going to tell you. There's a weird scene in this book. I'm really sorry for the light and the graininess now. But she's an odd little lady, she is. And she writes little weird bits and bobs, but she's quite a dirty old lady, okay? No, she wasn't actually an old lady when she wrote this one. I think she was about 40, so she wasn't old at all when she wrote this one. But I really like this series. I gave this one 4 stars. The first in the series I also gave 4 stars. I highly recommend this little series, as long as you're not opposed to a little bit of sex here and there. So yeah, really sweet little book. I really enjoyed that one, although it was a little bit weird. Then I read You by Caroline Kepnes. I have done a full review on this one, non-spoiler, and me and Beck Zen Books, Becky, have done a full 2.5 hour long spoilery discussion. So I will link both of those below. I loved it. I gave it 5 stars. Also in my top 5 books of this year. An incredible psychological thriller. Wonderful. Then I read Daughters Unto Devils by Amy Lukavics. It's a little horror, sort of. It was described, okay, it was described as a mix between Little House on the Prairie and Stephen King. And it is offensive to compare this book to Stephen King. It is offensive to horror fans everywhere. It's offensive to Stephen King. This book wasn't scary. This book was really, really boring. It was written okay. The characters had basically no development. It was predictable. I didn't enjoy it at all. I finished it in a day, and I was glad to see the end of it. I gave it 2 stars. Then I read Look Behind You by Sybil Hodge. This was a psychological thriller / crime thriller. Basically following, Look Behind You, Daughters Unto Devils, I forgot to say, follows a family who, in order to escape the harsh winters up on their mountain, they travel down the mountain into the prairie to try and survive the coming year. And they're moving into a bigger place because there's lots and lots of children. I've forgotten how many because I tried to push it from my mind. But yeah, they arrive in this house on the prairie where they're going to live, and inside it is absolutely covered in blood, and the dad's like, nah, they just slaughtered a bear or something, it's alright, we'll live here, I'll do it up nice and proper. And yeah, it's like a horror story after, like, based on what happens to them in this little house. 2 stars, not good. Then I read Look Behind You by Sybil Hodge, psychological / crime thriller following a woman who is convinced she's been kidnapped, but she's had psychological breakdowns and stuff in the past, so they don't know whether to believe her. Everyone thinks it's in her head, except she knows that it's not. And it basically follows that. I thought it was predictable, the characters had no development, it was cliche, it was stereotypical. Oh, did this really did this happen, or was it all in my mind? Oh, it was not great. So yeah, no character development, boring, predictable, stereotypical. I gave it 2 stars because it was written well. You can't take away a good piece of writing, it just, you know, wasn't for me. Then I read my favourite read. Funnily enough, this was my favourite, even though Pretty Girls was up there, this has been my favourite read of the year so far, and that's saying something. I read Red Queen by Victoria Aveyard, and I loved it so much. Oh, come to me, you sweet, beautiful book porn. Oh, it was so good. In this world, there are 2 types of blood. There is silver bloods, and silver bloods can do magic, but they can only do one particular type of magic. So there are water nymphs who can control water, and there are fire people who can control fire, and then there's people who can bend light and people who can bend shadows and that sort of thing. And then there's the red bloods who have no powers, they're just normal like you and me, and you know, they basically slaves in this world. They're not seen as equal to the silver bloods are all over them, except this one girl who is a red can do magic, and oh, it's so good. Oh, it was amazing, and I can't wait for the second one. I'm so excited. The characters were amazing, the plot was amazing, the characters were amazing, and I cried. And oh, the next one's out in February and I'm so excited. I gave it 5 stars. Let's just act refined. Kerry, act refined and dignified, So yeah, I gave this one 5 stars. And then I read Shadow and Bone by Leigh Bardugo. Finally, I read the first in the Grisha trilogy, and I really enjoyed it. I think, obviously it was a setup book. It wasn't, like, there wasn't loads and loads of action, there wasn't, you know, it's really difficult to, because when they're setup books, you can't really say much. So the character development was wonderful. I really did like the character development. I thought it was a little bit predictable in some places. I would have liked to have seen a little bit more happen, but it did create the feels in me. It was written really nicely and written well. I already have figured out who she's going to end up with, and I'm not happy about it, because I'm not going to say which team I am, because on the off chance you haven't read it yet, I don't want to spoil you. But basically the person who she's going to end up with, I'm pretty sure I don't want her to end up with. But yeah, I really, really enjoyed it. I thought it was written nicely. It was a great setup book, and I hope to read the rest next year. I gave this one 4 stars. So, that's my November wrap-up. It's warm now. I'm gonna go and do some reading and cuddle my pussycat, because she's fast asleep on my bed right now. Makes a change not to have her pester me while I'm doing a video. So, have you read any of these books? Would you like to read any of these books? Did you enjoy my little wrap-up? Let me know down below. So, yeah, I'll link my reviews to You by Caroline Kepnes, and my next video should be up very soon for you. Mwah, 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 mwah. Goodbye, my lovelies.